Welcome to the FRP DB003 assembly and maintenance tutorial. In this video, we're going to show you the step-by-step process of assembling your DB003 and show you how to change essential parts like the tire and throttle. So, let's get started and get your bike ready for action. To assemble the DB003, the tools you will need for product installation are external hexagonal screwdriver, external hexagonal wrench, hex screwdrivers, and clutch screwdrivers. Front fork. Loosen the screws on the bearings. Thread the handlebar out from the front fork and set it aside. Insert the bearings into the connection between the front fork and the head tube. Tighten the screws and secure them with wrenches. Handlebar. First, loosen the screws on the handlebar presses. Insert the entire handlebar press into the screw holes above the front fork. Tighten the handlebar presses using an external hexagonal screwdriver. Adjust the handlebar's angle to securely fasten the handlebar press in place. Front tire. First, loosen the spacer and nut on the bearing. Place the spacer on the inner side of the front fork, and thread the bearing through the spacer and the tire. Place the other spacer on the opposite side of the tire, and thread the bearing through it. Thread the nut onto the end and secure it using a 14mm and 19mm wrench. Front fender. First, loosen the screws at the mounting position of the front fender on the front fork. Then place the front fender onto the front fork. Fasten the front fender in place with screws and tighten them using hex screwdrivers. How to disassemble or assemble DB003 front tire. The tools you will need for front tire replacement are clutch screwdriver, external hexagonal wrench, and hex screwdriver. Use a 14mm wrench to secure the bearing on one side of the tire, and use a 17mm wrench to rotate the nut on the other end of the bearing. Loosen the nut, then remove the bearing, spacer, and tire. To install a new front tire, prepare the new tire and bearings. First, loosen the spacer and nut on the bearing. Place the spacer on the inner side of the front fork, and thread the bearing through the spacer and the tire. Place the other spacer on the opposite side of the tire, and thread the bearing through it. Thread the nut onto the end and secure it using a 14mm and 17mm wrench. How to disassemble or assemble DB003 back tire. The tools you will need for back tire replacement are clutch screwdriver, external hexagonal wrench, and hex screwdriver. Loosen the disc brake with a 5mm hex screwdriver and remove the brake cable. Loosen the tensioner nuts on both sides of the tire. Secure the bearing on one side of the tire using a 14mm wrench, then use a 17mm wrench to turn the nut on the other end of the bearing. Loosen the nut and remove the bearing and spacer. Remove the chain from the sprocket and take out the tire. To install a new rear tire, prepare the new tire and bearings. Place the tensioner on the outer side of the front fork, insert the spacer on the inner side of the front fork, then put on the disc brake, and pass the bearing through. Place the second spacer on the outer side of the disc brake, and thread the bearing through the spacer and the tire. Place the other spacer on the opposite side of the tire, and thread the bearing through it. Fit the tensioning wheel on the outer side of the bearings and secure it with a nut. Insert the chain onto the chain sprocket and adjust the tensioner on both sides to the appropriate positions, ensuring smooth movement of the tire. Secure bearing using a 14mm and 17mm wrench. Thread the brake cable through the disc brake and secure it in place using a 5mm hex screwdriver. How to disassemble or assemble DB003 throttle. The tool you will need for throttle replacement is a Phillips head screwdriver. Remove the black sleeve and use a Phillips head screwdriver to unscrew the screws on the orange plastic part. Turn the silver snap counterclockwise to release it and separate the orange plastic part. Turn the throttle to adjust the throttle cable position and remove the cable. Put the orange plastic part back on, and use a Phillips head screwdriver to loosen the screws underneath the throttle to remove the damaged throttle. Insert the replacement throttle back in place and pivot the orange plastic section. Turn the throttle to adjust its position and reattach the throttle cable. Put back the orange plastic part, tighten the silver snap clockwise, place the black sleeve, and screw it tightly. Reattach the unscrewed screws, tighten the previously loosened screws, and finally, turn the throttle to check the installation status.